Good morning, Thursday 14th of October, and Celtic are back in action this weekend. It's Motherwell for the Hoops, intent on getting 3 points after what has been a sticky start to the season after the second international break, Sean, but still well in the hunt. And so are Motherwell, to be honest, as it stands, really. They're above Celtic in the table, if we're going to be brutally honest about it that way. They've had a good start to the season. They're sitting a point above Celtic, so they're in fourth place. Celtic are sixth. It's going to be a tough game for Celtic this weekend. We've done a wee bit of analysis on Motherwell, what they're good at and how they might be able to hurt Celtic. How are you feeling ahead of this one, Sean? Because I think over the years, there've been a lot of fairly close games between them. I think going back to the most obvious one would be when Brendan Rodgers was the manager and Tom Rogic scored in the last minute for a 4-3 victory. That was a tremendously exciting game, that one.
I think as much as there are a few close games in there, I think it's like a run of 8 wins in a row Celtic are on statistically. 3 of those at Fir Park, and overall unbeaten against them since December 2015. But I do take your point. There's been close games in there. It's not always a one-sided match, and obviously the weight of that start depends on how much importance you put on club v club kind of dynamics. Because there's so many players in this Celtic team in particular this season who will have never faced Motherwell before anyway.
Yeah, that's a fair point. They're doing as well as I think could be expected at the minute. Motherwell, they're beating teams that they need to be beating and picking up decent results elsewhere. A point at McDermott, they beat Aberdeen as well, but they beat the 3 teams down towards the bottom of the league. They got a great point against Rangers. So look, they're motoring along really quite nicely at the minute. Them and Dundee United are probably the 2 surprise packages as it stands. And Graham Alexander, since he came in January, has had a great winning record. He'd won 11 of his 24 games in charge with nearly a 50% win rate, which is pretty good going for a Motherwell manager. And that includes the first 3 games, which Motherwell didn't win. So it would be 11 wins in 21 games before this as this season kicked off. So look, he's kind of slotted in nicely as Motherwell manager. They've replaced a few players. Tony Watt's hitting form at the right time. I think one thing that we can identify about Motherwell, and I think we can maybe relate this to Livingston, who got a result against Celtic recently, is that Motherwell are very comfortable and adept at delivering the ball from wide areas and hurting their opposition that way. So Motherwell have scored 12 goals in the league this season, or 12 goals in total, sorry. 6 of them have been deliveries from wide areas that have been stuck away with a header. I mean, that is a fairly high proportion of goals in a way that Celtic will need to be wary of.
I think so. I think with the crosses, it's you mentioned. I don't know if you mentioned Van Veen and you'll get the other winger Woolery, but you've also, I think, statistically, their best assister, if you want to put it that way, their best creator so far has been Jake Carroll, their left back. So the right flank for Celtic could be where it's usually left flank heavy, but this game could actually be right flank heavy if they continually try to get Van Veen and Carroll involved in doubling up on whoever the right back is, Ralston or if Juranovic is back. So they will look to use crossing to get their chances, but I wouldn't be surprised if that works in the sense that, like, Ange Postecoglou's defensive intentions are usually to force opponents wide more than central if possible, just because statistically it decreases your chances of scoring. And so far, despite the shaky moments individually, Celtic's defence has been okay overall in the league, especially. You referenced how many crosses they put in. Celtic actually put in double the amount of crosses that Motherwell do, but given that Motherwell only have like 40% of the ball on average, it is a decent amount to put in 12 crosses a game. So it is somewhere that Celtic will need to be worried.
I think the most notable thing about Motherwell from the outside looking in this season is that Tony Watt seems to have found a happy home. It's been a long time now since he was a Celtic player. He's been here, there and everywhere. Bulgaria, Belgium, the English Championship, and he's been back up to the Scottish Prem on a couple of occasions too. But Motherwell seems to be where he's happy, where he's appreciated, and where he's clicking with his teammates. I think he's got 4 in 8 this season for Motherwell. I think it'd be quite the thing if he came back to haunt Celtic this weekend, given the run of form he's on.
Don't tempt fate, Andy. No, it's almost good in a way to see, because I think quite a few probably of our age group probably thought Tony Watt might have broke through at Celtic a wee bit more than he did. That obviously, that goal aside, I think he did have strings to his bow that ultimately were never really realised at Celtic. So it is quite pleasing in a way to see him settle somewhere, and he's clearly happy, because you see him when he does his media commitments and stuff. He clearly comes across as someone who is happy with the situation he's in at Motherwell. And you only have to look at some players like, for instance, Lawrence Shankland, another striker who couldn't quite cut it at the Premiership level, so he dropped down and went to different clubs. I'm not saying Tony Watt dropped down, but you know what I mean. Went to different clubs and eventually found somewhere in Ayr United where it totally clicked for him, and he's only kicked on since then. So these things do happen. Obviously with Celtic, we only spoke about it the other day. Jack Hendry moving on, finding somewhere that suited him, that clicked for him, that he settled, and it does influence the kind of performances that you put in on the pitch. And it looks as if that's what's been happening with Tony Watt at Motherwell.
Does it concern you that Motherwell seem to be pretty adept on the counter at the minute? There's a stat that sticks out on their Y Scout, is that 47% of their counter attacks ends with an attempt on goal. That seems pretty high to me. Not all of them go in, obviously, but in terms of actually making dangerous opportunities and hurting opposition, that's not bad. Nearly 1 in 2.
I suppose it depends on the quality of the chances and the shots that they're getting off, but nonetheless, if they're getting them off, then Celtic need to be on guard for them. What I would say is, and this kind of ties into the Tony Watt thing as well, is against Rangers, they usually go 4-3-3, but in that draw that they got against Rangers, they changed to more of a 4-1-4-1, and it was Tony Watt up front on his own. And although it ultimately worked because they got the point from the game, it still seemed on that occasion that it owed a lot to Rangers not taking their chances more than anything else. So Celtic will still, you would think, be confident of creating plenty even on the smaller Fir Park pitch.
Yeah, the Rangers had 24 shots against Motherwell that day, only 6 on target, mind you, so it's not like Liam Kelly was having to spring into action every 2 minutes. But yeah, Rangers certainly had the majority of the action in the opposition third. The man Van Veen has been a hit at Fir Park straight away. I've seen him live a couple of times, and he's certainly an entertaining player. The sort of guy that they'll pull out flicks and tricks and marvel the crowd for 5 minutes and then be non-existent maybe for the next 10, 15, but still be capable of popping up and doing something amazing. I think the way that he likes to play football has endeared him to the crowd straight away. He scored a couple of goals against Hibs on the opening day and in the opener, and scored the opener against Aberdeen recently in the 2-0 win. I think that if Celtic are going to have to keep their eye on one of the Motherwell players, as well as Tony Watt, he absolutely has to be watched as well. But it'll be interesting, I think, if Graham Alexander plays him, because I think that maybe he might be a bit of a luxury for Motherwell, and I'm not sure they can afford that when they're playing one of the much stronger teams in the league.
I don't know. It depends on his intent, because if you're saying, I mean, as you've mentioned there, that the counter attack would be crucial, but also the flanks for crosses. And as I say, against Rangers, just basing that on the fact that they know they're not going to have much of the ball even at home against Celtic, and they only spend about 40% of the game with the ball anyway. I think he might just risk it. I think he might just risk it. Sometimes that's what a team like Motherwell that won't have the ball that much and rely on the wide areas. Van Veen starts out wide, so he might just risk it because it's at home. If you're saying he likes him and he's been a kind of maverick, then sometimes in that kind of game against Celtic or Rangers, that's the type of moment of magic that you need. Whether they actually get it or not, or it's one of those games where you say that he drifts out and doesn't really do much, I suppose it will depend largely on what they do with the ball when they get it, but also how Celtic approach the game.
I was working at the Motherwell County game recently, and I noticed that the substitution that County made, they brought on one of their loanees, Joseph Hungbo, who's up here for the season from Watford, a very, very fast winger. And he had an absolutely tremendous second half. They couldn't really deal with his pace and directness. And I wonder, and he was on the right side of the park. I wonder if that would maybe play into the hands a wee bit of Abada or Jota if he swapped over to that sort of side, because they're similar players to that. Get the ball, drive at your opponent and get past them. And on that day for County, Hungbo had a real amount of success doing that.
You've also, the other wing for County, Charles Cook, is quite direct in an almost a kind of Abada sense. So that could be an avenue as well. I don't mind. I think Jota has shown that he can do it on the right as much as the left. They obviously switched to the right against Aberdeen, ended up scoring the winner from cut like a run from the right. He's also tormented a few players from the left this season already. So I think it's good to have options in that sense. I think it would almost, I'm very intrigued, put it this way, to see how Jota, if he starts on the left, shapes up against Stephen O'Donnell. I think that could be an avenue for great success, and I'm not one of those that totally underrates Stephen O'Donnell. I think he's a solid player, but I'm intrigued to see how he copes with Jota's trickery and pace.
One thing that I'm intrigued to see about this game as well is in midfield. Motherwell lost Alan Campbell in the summer. He went away down to Luton in the English Championship. His replacement is Callum Slattery, who they signed in a 3-year deal from Southampton. Fairly young player still, just struggling to break through at a Premier League team. See it so often. He's come up and filled the void straight away. On the occasions that I've seen him, he's been all action. He scored a screamer against Ross County in that game I've just mentioned. But what I've noticed about him is that he's very quick to get to his man, to press, anticipate and swarm where the danger is. And I think that if Celtic are maybe a bit pedestrian or dally in midfield, I think that Slattery could quite easily get a grip of it and grab it by the scruff of the neck. And with the two playmakers that Celtic have been enjoying playing recently, with Turnbull, who'll be against his former club, and Tom Rogic, then if they're not sharp and on their game, I think that Slattery could get on top of them.
Potentially, but I think that would depend on not so much on Slattery, but on his midfield partners. Because if he's pressing himself, then Celtic have got the quality of players just to pop it round him. So if he presses, if they're disciplined with when they let him press and when he leads a press in the middle, then maybe that will put Celtic under pressure and impact the flow of Celtic's game. But if he's going to, for instance, try it himself, try and get a grip of it himself, I think Celtic will just pop it round him, and it would actually harm Motherwell rather than aid them.
One thing, and I've had a bit of a mind blank about this actually, but I was thinking about Giakoumakis. He injured his calf recently. What was the eventual prognosis on that?
I don't think he's far away, but I don't know if he's been confirmed to have been ready to start or anything like that. So
I wondered with the international break if that he, I don't think, would have been involved in anyway. If he would have been one to get in the Celtic team this weekend, if Furuhashi has had a taxing couple of days or week over with Japan, just wondered if that would be an option if he was fit, but I don't think he is. Is that right?
Well, he was on the bench at Aberdeen, but it was more that I don't think he was fit to start. But even if he was, if Kyogo's there, he will start. You would think. It's an option. It's definitely an option to come off the bench. You would think, unless he's taking another knock, which there's no suggestion he has. So I'd imagine he'll be on the bench again. Kyogo, I mean, the travelling, yes, but he only played half an hour in both games, so it's probably not too bad. So I would expect Kyogo to start.
I think, to be honest, that the kind of big rough and tumble defenders that Motherwell have, the couple of Scandinavian boys in there, Ricky Lamy as well, Bevis Mugabe, they probably would prefer to play against Giakoumakis rather than Kyogo.
Aye, it's always worrying for a large defence if you're playing against a quick-minded as well as quick-footed player with intelligent movement that Kyogo has.
We've got David Bradley in the comments asserting that this is where he wants to see David Turnbull running games. These are we've said a couple of times, Sean, that in the big games, David Turnbull hasn't really shown what we think he might be capable of. But Motherwell, he's done it when the chips are up for Celtic, I suppose, in the thumpings that they dished out earlier on in the season to Dundee and St Mirren, scored his hat-trick. Do you think that this is the sort of game where you want to see more from Turnbull, or is he doing enough in these situations?
No, I think it's more that it's kind of topsy-turvy with performances lately. We spoke at the start of the season about how it didn't look as if he was quite getting to grips with what was expected off the ball in Ange Postecoglou's kind of style, and then it just kind of flipped and he went through a purple patch, and it was a really good purple patch, and then after that it's dipped again. So I think you're looking, and he was getting, I keep using the word flogged, him and Rogic starting together constantly wasn't ideal and isn't ideal. But he's had 2 games there for Scotland where he was away with the team and stuff, but he never played. So in a way that could maybe benefit Celtic. He's had a wee bit of a rest. As long as he's enjoyed being away with the Scotland team and he comes back in a good frame of mind, I would be expecting a good performance, especially at his old hunting ground.
Great, right. Well, there'll be another briefing tomorrow. And remember, you can subscribe to the Celtic Way just now for only £1 a month, and that'll take you pretty much up to the end of the year. Really great deal for what's on offer here at the website. And also subscribe to us on YouTube, and you'll get alerts whenever we go live with one of these videos or any other video gets uploaded to the site. So thanks for joining us once more, and we'll be back again tomorrow.